Dearly beloved, mi gente, we are gathered here today to get through this thing we call the end of days by Immortalizing Cinema. Hello everyone, I'm Dobie, that's Polly, Almonds. Before I stream the big VFX show I've been working on, I wanted to go over my viewing journal, some of the things I've been watching, and I'm gonna make little doodles while I lay down my thoughts. Alright, so let's go to my Letterboxd. Actually, let's go to my blurg, because the pictures there might rejog my memories of some of these. And just a heads up, I'm not going to discuss any of the films I rated lower than mixed, the 2.5 stars, because I don't want to be too harsh or crap on anyone's effort. Alright, we scroll down to March. At the beginning of March, on the 2nd, I saw Gamera, the Super Monster, from 1980 by Noriaki Yuasa. I always thought it was common knowledge that these films didn't really get great until the Heisei era in 1995 when they rebooted Gamera. This one is kind of unique though because it's sort of a Frankenstein's monster reassemblage of all the footage from the previous films going all the way back to 1965. And it's all recut to try to make one narrative to where it's just like a highlight reel of Gamera's coolest moments from all those films. And then they shot a bunch of new footage with these kids and intercut it within the old films. Sort of the way in the 90s, Saban took all the Himitsu Sentai Go Ranger stuff and put American teenagers in it to make Power Rangers. I usually hate reappropriations of footage, especially in feature films. Obviously, if you're making a documentary or an essay, you're going to use old footage, but I'm talking about with feature films specifically. Don't steal old footage, just make your own film and create new elements. George Powell's company would do this sometimes, like Atlantis, The Lost Continent. They just took a bunch of footage from Quo Vadis and put a facelift over it. Or Midway 1976 took a bunch of footage from Tora Tora Tora. Or even one of the Star Trek films uses the climax explosion, and it's so distractingly obvious that it's from the previous film. Everyone would be mad if you went to see Star Wars and they just kept reusing the same Death Star attack explosion in each film. There's this feeling of being ripped off. Anyway, but somehow with this Gamera film, I don't know, it didn't bother me as much. It's like a Cliff Notes on the past films. You can just brush up on them real quick and see a sizzle reel of all the funniest shit. Really fun, cute miniatures, great effects, but nothing to write home about in terms of the humanity or drama on display. And then this little doodle I made, here's the giant baby Squirtle in space. Summer of 1980, flying into cinemas near you. And then his little fart rockets propel him through space. Whatever, check it out if you like kaiju films. Alright, so scroll up. We're moving to March 3rd. Oh, I saw this slasher film called The Initiation. Someone recommended this to me on Letterboxd because of how unique they thought the twist ending was, and I concur. It's kind of a frustrating movie though. There was so much good and then so much goofy that felt out of place. Very young Daphne Zuniga is good in the lead. At times it seemed like it was going to tackle this war between solidarity with girls and the bullying and hazing that goes on in sororities, but it only ever scratches the surface of much greater things like Slumber Party Massacre or Black Christmas 74. There was a lot tonally that felt mismatched to me. One moment there'd be great acting, another moment there'd be just god-awful exposition, and then there was like really sloppy staging one second, and then kind of clever directorial things going on sprinkled throughout, and then dramatically there'd be this stupid shit, and suddenly something really heavy and bittersweet. Not to spoil anything, but it all does somehow keep you curious about the mystery of who's been killing all these people, and it ends up in a place that I didn't see coming, and I think that makes it pretty unique amongst horror films, or especially 80s slasher films. Okay, so move on. Alright, on March 6th, a pen pal sent this to me on DVD. I have a region-free BCB player. This awesome 1984 Japanese movie called Mermaid Legend, directed by Toshihiro Akita. It's the brilliant, haunting psychological thriller / revenge thriller. It starts out like this eco-conscious John Sayles film, but then it morphs into something more like mythic and surreal journey of this Lady Vengeance in the form of this super pretty lady that plays the lead. I don't know how to say her name. She almost becomes like a force or a metaphor for the wrath of nature. I haven't been able to stop thinking about this since I saw it, and I may actually end up rating it higher than I did. It's definitely one of the best movies of 1984 that I've seen. Alright, let's scroll up. Got this one on Criterion Blu-ray. Speaking of what I was talking about with The Initiation earlier, a movie that's tonally all over the place, this was afflicted with that too. Jojo Dancer, Your Life is Calling, from 1986, that Richard Pryor stars in, he wrote, and he directed. It is thoughtful and dramatically brilliant at parts, but it's also frustrating. And Pryor, I think he meant for parts of it to be intended as just really dark comedy, but it was really sad shit to me, making me like get choked up about drug addiction and stuff, and it was playing it for laughs. Or at least I felt like it was playing it for laughs. Pryor was obviously one of the funniest performers ever. He's a great writer, but I don't know if he's a great director, and that's one of the problems with the film. Like, look at Bob Fosse's All That Jazz. Kind of similar movie. It's about the creator's life, like a meta Charlie Kaufman written biopic. And I felt like while I was watching this, the movie needed that type of vision that Bob Fosse had on All That Jazz. If you didn't change anything about the script and just had Pryor maybe step away as director, let him focus on the acting, writing, and producing, this movie probably could have been like a colossal Fellini-esque comedy that we still talk about to this day instead of an obscure little curiosity that gets overlooked. Maybe in the vein of Hollywood Shuffle or heavier. I do admire his tenacity, though, that he wanted to be in full control of this project because it was so personal to him. It really is like he's bearing his soul for the audience. But I think Pryor's soul was so bright, it deserved a far greater film than what this is in terms of like filmmaking craft drama. It's still pretty good though. Definitely see it if you're a fan of stand-up comedy and Richard Pryor. Now we're on March 8th at the theater. I saw this with my buddy Eric. Night of the Zoopocalypse. I think it's called Zombies in the United Kingdom. It's based on one of Clive Barker's only children's stories, the guy that wrote Hellraiser, or The Hellbound Heart. It was pretty darn good. Really good character design, lighting scheme, unlike generic shit like Norm of the North, Alpha and Omega, Mad a Fart Scar.
Mad a Fart Scar!
It was like one of those if it actually had a visual POV. Also just kind of genuinely spooky movie for kids, which we don't get enough of anymore. Everything is such soft edges, baby mush now. Scary, but not too scary. It's good to see something macabre for the little ones every now and again. Remind them why they once feared the dark. But the zombie creatures are so funny. Their mythology within the story that they came up with is such a cool gimmick to get around zombie gore, blood, and guts. This part is one of my favorite moments, is the tense where they're having to creep past this antelope gummy. They call the creatures gummies. The zombified antelope that's just licking alien slime coming out of a vent. Sweet nectar.
Sweet nectar.
Alright, going forward in March. Oh, Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17. A24 seems to have given him a pretty big budget to do this story. It's kind of all his pet themes too, from his entire filmography rolled into one kabuki science fiction movie, like dystopian worlds, downtrodden working poor, strange creatures and animals that are allegories for larger concepts. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really funny. It's definitely one of the more interesting movies of the year. It's probably my least favorite Bong Joon-ho feature film, but I mean, when I make my best of the year list in December, it's still going to be high on my honorables for the year because it's still really good. In a way, it felt like Joon-ho's take on Terry Gilliam's Brazil, a future where everything is supposed to work more conveniently, yet everything is shittier and falling apart and completely inhumane. Just like Gilliam's Brazil, even though it's set in the future, it's really all about our anxieties about the present. And the entire ensemble's great. Mark Ruffalo's hilarious, but Robert Pattinson steals the show with the dual performance. It's been a good year for actors playing twins, with De Niro in The Alto Knights and Michael B. Jordan in Sinners, which I'm going to be talking about soon. Oh, here's this part where clone number 17 of Mickey falls into an ice fissure on this planet, and one of these creeper animals is crawling over towards him. possibly to devour him. No spoilers here. Just check out the film. All right, let's move on. March 11th. Me and my wife rented this, Sugar and Spice from 2001. There was a pretty cool moment in the late 90s, early aughts, where really genuinely irreverent comedies were getting produced through the studio system. Wacky stuff with real actors that could have spawned from like Blake Edwards' imagination, mixed some John Hughes and Zucker Brothers. Most of them were just good, but some of them were borderline great. I'm talking about like Bubble Boy, Not Another Teen Movie. But I'm a Cheerleader is actually genuinely great. This one fits in nicely with that era. It's pretty damn funny. Has a punk attitude. Marley Shelton's the lead. She has to lead her army of ditzy cheerleaders to rob this bank inside a grocery store to help with her family issues. And if the movie were like a TV episode, I could see it fitting into like the universe of Pushing Daisies and My Name is Earl as far as the tone goes. Some of those cheerleader skills even came in handy when they did their heist. Look, we're lifting her up. She spray paints the security cam. All right, let's go. Here we go. March 13th. Another Blu-ray came from Criterion. Michael Mann's Thief. His debut feature. It's still one of the coolest, slickest movies. He's one of the slickest and coolest directors ever. And his style influence on genre crime films, action films, it's immeasurable. And this one is still just one of the best movies about criminals with a very specific code. Of his theatrically released features, I don't think Michael Mann has ever made a bad film. And I'm not including that made-for-TV warm-up for Heat. It's the same story as Heat, but with a 80s made-for-TV budget. Thief, 1981. It's just badass, top-shelf, cool cinema. Alright, let's scroll up. On March 15th, again at Angelica, we saw this sad movie called The World Will Tremble. By a director named Leor Geller. It has that guy in it, the troubled younger brother from The Haunting of Hill House. He also played her crazy husband in the Invisible Man reboot that Lionel did a while back. You could definitely file this one under war drama, but I thought of it mostly as a suspense thriller about survival. And two of the bravest dudes ever escaped one of the earliest extermination camps them Nazi pigs set into motion. This was so early in Hitler's genocide machine that they were the first ones to barely escape and get to a safe zone area to give intel to the military intelligence community of the Allies. Let the world know, that sound the alarm that the Fuhrer and Nazis were actually putting forth his quote-unquote final solution machine into place, which he always said he would do. And one of the most heartbreaking things to me is when they were finally able to testify, make a detailed report. Some of the intelligence community doubted it. And even worse, some of them were just apathetic. And they didn't care. I thought the film itself had some overall pacing issues, but mostly it was just pretty harrowing. If you were going to make like a double feature, no, let's do a quadruple feature for like a class of young minds to show the dark chapters in our history with an emphasis on strong moral, social conscience. I would show them this with maybe Barry Jenkins' Underground Railroad TV show. Peter Weir's The Way Back would make a good thematic feature with this, the Escape. And then finally finish it off with Ellen Klimov's Come and See, hopefully incubating some proper anti-fascist minds for the future. Just always stand against Nazis. Curb stomp Harkonnens. And I shouldn't have to say this, it should be a no-brainer, but be anti-genocide for goodness sake. Now I'm scrolling up to March 16th. At the theater we saw this one. Daddy PWS is back, or should I, Mommy and Daddy PWS are back. And frankly, judging from the usual hoity-toity posh brigade at Feces Tomatoes, we don't deserve them. But what else is new? Most of these sprinkle sacks couldn't even write art criticism to save their life. You're typists, the lot of you. Paul's one of the greatest action directors of his generation, along with the Wachowskis, David Twohy, or one of those two Hughes brothers. Fucking Zack Snyder definitely rides his coattails stylistically. There's an obvious influence there. I'm not hating on Snyder, I do love a lot of his stuff, but I'm just saying, if we're talking about distinctive styles in genre action movies. So the movie isn't Shakespeare, big deal. It's still a solid action fantasy. It's It's like a post-apocalyptic green screen Corbucci spaghetti western. I wish the digital flares in 50% of these shots had been reduced. Their addition seemed like a stylistic departure for Paul. If I ran one of these big movie studios, I would definitely pick Paul to do the Devil May Cry film. Also, Fist of the North Star. Like my Dave Bautista, he looks like Mr. Clean. I'm surrounded by goblins. Let me shoot this barrel of monkeys. Blap, blap. Alright, let's go on. Ooh, Ash. It's about Ash Ketchum. Or Ashley Williams. I mean, you pick your horror fantasy. I think Flying Lotus has directed some of the greatest music videos ever, and I really dug the way this had the that Mario Bava candy-colored style, Dario Argento, that Panis Cosmatos has used in a lot of his great stuff. It was just a fine, not great, space freak-out film. Score is incredible. Some of the best perspective miniature work in all of 2025. That main spacesuit design was inspired as heck, but some of the other wardrobe decisions throughout had me scratching my head. Steven saved the best kill in the film for himself. I see what you did there, Patron. I preferred the cringe comedy horror movie he made called Clouseau. That was one of the funniest movies of that year. And here she's looking at this anomaly in the sky. Oh, what is it, Aurora Borealis?
Aurora Borealis!
Moving on. March 18th, we saw this at the theater. The Day the Earth Blew Up, this new Looney Tunes movie. Do you love Animaniacs? Do you love classic Daffy Duck, classic Merry Melodies, Looney Tunes? This is made for your psyche if you love that stuff. It is so damn creative visually. It is storyboarded like a work of art. And frame by frame animation, this isn't hyperbole, on a par with The Iron Giant. The film isn't as great as Iron Giant, but it's apples and oranges. It's a totally different thing. And the main antagonist in this film, this Martian, at first I thought he might be Marvin the Martian in disguise, but he is such a hilarious creation, like the Monstars were in Space Jam. He's also genuinely creepy and scary. He has this really high-pitched voice like Judge Doom. It's not the type of voice you expect to come out of that guy. Here he's falling down the stairs. Dazzling stuff. And shame on Warner Brothers for not being proud of this. The tiny indie distributor had to pick up the slack. You guys crap on the memory of Looney Tunes, your bread and butter that built your studio. I'm summoning the ghost of Chuck Jones, Friz Freleng, maybe Tex Avery. One of you guys, find the CEO, David Zaslav, and give him a swift kick in the pills. Alright, let's go. I watched this one on the Criterion app, A Woman of Paris. One of Charlie Chaplin's only dramas. I've seen another drama by him that he's actually in, but this is his only drama, and it's one of his only films that he's not in. And it's a real heavy, sad movie about a gal who feels she was jilted or dumped by this guy, and it kind of puts into place all these sad, melodramatic events that happen. Could be like a primer for the types of heavy fatalist dramas that Truffaut made. I guess the French really dig tragic things like this. Things like The Soft Skin, Jules and Jim. All right, let's go on. March 21st. Carson Lund. The great Carson Lund. When I was a kid and I first started forming my palette for film critics that I enjoyed reading, Carson would write at Slant Magazine. Now in the tradition of a lot of critics who also made the jump to filmmaking. Speaking of Truffaut and Godard, this movie Ephus. I guess going into it you kind of think, oh, it's going to be like Bad News Bears. The early one, not the Linklater one. Maybe something Jody Hill would do. But it's really more... I don't know, there's something zen about it. It was more like Yatsuhiro Ozu presents Ball Game. Just something fun about spending time with these guys and hanging out with your friends. We've been blessed with a lot of charming indie films this year, with genuine emotion about everyday normal people. Carson is also a superb DP. Alright, let's scroll up to March 22nd. We're All Gonna Die. I'm not familiar with these Rocket Jump guys. They run a YouTube channel, sketch comedy guy. I don't know what they do. But this was a pretty interesting indie, albeit a bit slow for my palate. Had a cool plot device about this supernatural event that's happening on the Earth in this universe they created. I think they called it The Spike. It's this giant interdimensional tentacle, like H.P. Lovecraft, that's just spiking down into the earth, causing all these anomalies all over. But it's really just there like the Zone in Stalker. That's not the point of the film. The movie is about this road trip with these two friends and like grief, coming to terms with some heavy stuff. I just thought some of the pacing was a little boring, but I don't know, it might grow on me. Let's move on. Okay, on March 23rd, I watched this on a streaming platform from Asia, The Touch.
You got the touch!
With Michelle Yeoh. I don't think this got a very wide release in the United States in 2002. It's not the normal sort of kung fu stuff she usually does in terms of plot. It kind of felt like a Lara Croft, Uncharted, Indiana Jones type globe-trotting explorer story, the Mummy films, but with Michelle Yeoh, Mama Yeoh. And Ben Chaplin. Whatever happened to that guy? Now we have like the upgraded version of Ben Chaplin, Christopher Abbott. It was fun, mixed bag. Just kind of some of the fight choreography was awesome, and then editing and lighting would fuck it up. Here's this part where she catches herself with a front to back splits, not your dad's Jean-Claude Van Damme splits, front to back. Whoa! At this point, I've seen Michelle Yeoh do so many wirework stunts that I just fully convinced she can actually do wuxia stuff and dodge bullets in real life. She's magic. Let's move on to March 24th. I just discovered these guys, the DeLiberto brothers. I bought these from their website on Blu-ray. The Gorgon Pictures guys. They're just completely independent artists that produce all their stuff in-house within very small means. And it reminds me a lot of like early Ralph Bakshi or other contemporaries. Jaime R. in brackets, Morgan Galen King, Sinye Bauman, frame by frame, hand-drawn stuff, really intense psychedelic color palettes, sometimes pastels. I love this stuff, man, especially the Empress of Darkness film. See, they're sneaking around, and this monster's activating, his eyes waking up. This little guy flying around.
In the land of the blind, the little goblin flying around with one eye is king.
You love independent animation, support these guys, buy their stuff. Alright, let's scroll up. Alright, March 26th. Okay, this movie Fright from 1971, a British movie, a home invasion horror movie. Susan George, she was so beautiful. She still is so pretty, radiant. And she plays I guess she was supposed to be a teenager. She plays a babysitter that she starts hearing stuff outside the house, and at first it's like, oh, it's just a boyfriend coming to bother her. But then she does realize that the couple she's working for has tried to keep hidden that the original husband of the lady is a complete psychopath, and he breaks into the house, and it becomes a barricaded hostage situation with the police. But even though there was lots of spooky stuff and it was shot cool at parts, the guy who plays the main crazy is so over the top. I thought his performance was so funny. I thought he kind of looked like Flabber in Big Bad Beetleborgs or Jay Leno. Here he's holding a piece of jagged, broken mirror like a knife, and you see his face reflected in it. Alright, let's move on. The Friend, starring Apollo, the best Marmaduke behemoth doggy ever. He deserves pats on the head, maybe a nice vat of I can't believe it's not poop. I went in blind to this, and I hadn't loved anything by the director duo besides this movie I rented once called Suture, and I think that was from the 90s, early 90s. But this was great. I think it's based on a novel. Naomi Watts delivers one of the most moving performances of her whole career, and this dog of her friend who passed away kind of serves as a powerful catalyst for healing and her emotional rebirth after such grieving. The movie hits the right sentiment without wallowing in sentimentality, if you get the distinction. I think it's probably the best human-canine bonding film, probably since Quill, 2004 in Japan. Give that dog a little scratch on the noggin. Speak for yourself, moron. Alright, let's scroll up to... On March 29th, I got the Blu-ray of Arthur Penn's Night Moves from 1975. Gene Hackman was such a legend. Like De Niro, he's just pivotal to that American New Hollywood wave that came in the 70s. And his work in this along with The Conversation, was one of his greatest performances. Of course, directed by Arthur Penn, who cut his teeth directing live television. He really knew how to pull an audience into his story. Poor Mr. Hackman, man. It's an actual tragedy the way that old-timer and his wife went out. Please check on the elderly in your life. Check on your disabled family and neighbors, even if they say they don't want you to. Here's my little recreation snippet of Night Move's horrifying finale.
Oh my Lanta.
Alright, scroll up to... On March 31st, at the end of March, I saw Audrey's Children. As a chamber drama civics lesson, it was alright. It reminded me of stuff like The Zookeeper's Wife and this made-for-TV movie called Something the Lord Made. It was too pretty and competent to be lumped in with, like, Lifetime Channel junk. It worked for me most when it was focused on her actually practicing medicine, like nerdy science stuff and her with her patients, but not so much the workplace melodrama politics, even when the politics are aligned with my own. That stuff was all a bit tired. Some of the storylines in Mad Men did these exact themes 10 times better. I don't know what the exact formula is that makes something like Hidden Figures or On the Basis of Sex a bit marginally more crowd-pleasing than this. The whole ensemble is really good, but this is Natalie Dormer's show. Here she's playing the great humanist saint, Dr. Audrey Evans. I always find Natalie to be distractingly good-looking, but she's really damn remarkable in this. It's one of her best things she's done. Hey, speaking of Michael Mann, this was directed by his daughter. To me, Texas Killing Fields is still Amy Mann's best film. Not that Amy Mann. The director, Amy Kanan Mann. Okay, let's scroll up. Yeesh. Alright, on April 2nd, I saw Soderbergh's Black Bag. This is written by David Koepp, and I haven't seen their other film from earlier this year, The Ghost Story they did. This is a really slick, unglamorized spy film. Not quite Jean le Carré, but it's more that ballpark than like Tom Clancy. And like the former writer who wrote stuff like Smiley's People, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, or as I call it, Pizza, Pretzel, Burger, Pie. The day-to-day nature of these people who work in espionage, just like not really knowing who you can really trust, it would definitely drive me insane. Every interaction is just this constant two-faced, smiling glad hands. It's like, it feels like a chess game. And just as the case was with 3 Days of the Condor, by the time this thing wraps up, you can't help but feel cynical about our current geopolitical situation and how these different factions, shadow states, they may have condemned us to a neoliberal whirlpool, and we just don't even know it yet. Here's this part where this drone strike hits an SUV. Bro, my Escalade!
Allstate is never gonna believe this shit.
Alrighty, let's scroll up. April 4th. Freaky Tales. I really dug this one for the most part. It was a return to form for Team Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck. I thought the Captain Marvel thing they did was such a disappointing adaptation of the source. You'd think working at Marvel with all their resources and colossal budgets would bring some prestige, but God, why did it feel like they were slumming it there? Freaky Tales is an omnibus of 3 short stories that loosely connect. You could even say Freaky Tales is to 80s punk and indie movies what last year's Kinds of Kindness was to absurdist art house. I think the filmmakers did a pretty good job of capturing the energy of those late 80s Sundancer films, back when it meant more to do well at that festival. All of the segments are worthwhile, but 2 of them are much better than the other. When it does work, it pops with good energy. It mostly hits the mark. Here's this part where the Warriors come out to defend their turf. In a moment that would make Jello Biafra proud. Little lady had to take down the skinhead a peg or two. And this green neon energy and blood sprays out. Alright, scroll up. April 5th. April 5th we saw Death of a My Little Pony. Death of a Unicorn. This was the directorial debut of indie producer Alex Scarfman. Remember in Legend when Lily caused the apocalypse by distracting that unicorn? What if she also drove its body to the house of some obscenely rich old money? Would the surviving corn not be fully justified in violently swarming that domicile?
Of course.
As justified as those vampires in I Am Legend or the mom and dad T-Rex in The Lost World. Overall, I thought this was a pretty decent and amusing monster movie, with those mythological beasts coming for a funnier version of the oligarch family from Saltburn. All of the kills were entertaining, but I personally wish they had been a bit gorier, except for this one specific impalement through a character's noggin. That was glorious and grotesque in the best possible way. And what about Will Poulter snorting pixie sticks as a goof on self-help gurus?
That's gold, Jerry. Gold!
Between this movie, Warfare, On Swift Horses, and that Black Mirror episode, he's had a stellar 2025. A dynamic character actor who is, how you say, mucho bueno. I didn't really feel like the movie earned its daddy-daughter day catharsis at the end, and Paul Rudd plays such an infuriating little Mr. Smithers bitch. He's not bourgeois, but adjacent, petty bourgeois, and I guess that's kind of the point. So it's a credit to his range that he can be so insufferable. Violent Night, Bodies, 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 Ready or Not, and You're Next. These films doing good box office money. It's comforting to know mainstream audiences don't really mind watching one percenters suffer. Bring back the estate tax, damn it. This part where a scientist gets fully shish kebab through the back. Okay, let's scroll up to April 6th. Hell of a Summer. This was directed by that dingus kid Finn Wolfhard and his actor buddy Billy Burke. And you know something? They show a lot of directorial promise. And there were a lot of moments in this movie that made me genuinely laugh. When the film works, it sort of hits like Wet Hot American Summer by way of Friday the 13th.
Oh my god. Oh my god. You are a loser. You are a loser.
And also a little bit Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Occasionally some of the writing and dialogue got a little too cutesy for me personally, to the point of being cringy, but thankfully it never tanks down to the level of trash like Time Cut, so your mileage may vary. Check it out if you fuck with any of the aforementioned stuff. I'm just gonna check what they got in the fridge real quick.
Holy hell!
You alright?
Alright, scrolling up. April 7. This documentary, Mogwai, If the Stars Had a Sound, about that awesome Scottish rock group that plays spaced out post-rock. One of the first really loud concerts I ever went to as a wee lad in 2007 was a Mogwai show. They were touring the US to promote their album Mr. Beast, and they came through Dallas. And my ears are still ringing to this day. And this is a mesmerizing documentary, majestic and worthy of them and their sonic legacy. It captures the band's emotional depth and their creative spirit, very in sync with the power and beauty of what we come to know their music as. We've been spoiled by awesome music documentaries for 2025. Questlove released his awesome Sly and the Family Stone documentary, and that excellent At the Drive-In Mars Volta film, the Omar and Cedric, is going to get its wide release this year. And here they are on stage, summoning aliens over Glasgow. Let's move along. On March 8th, I saw an indie movie called Gazer. Is that like the main demon lady at the end of Ghostbusters, Gozer, if she were a bit more gay? All joking aside, this was a pretty interesting and frustrating mindfuck by Ryan J. Sloan. When you're crafting a movie where the main protagonist has some sort of brain injury or amnesia, it can always add an extra layer of suspense by the audience knowing that the protagonist's perception of truth might not be the most reliable. I'm talking about movies like Memento, The Lookout, or even recent things like Caveat or Die Alone. This was cut from the same cloth as those. The qualities of the movie above everything were how stylish the visuals were, and this gal in the lead performance, Ariella Mastrioni. She's phenomenal. But this intentionally slow, deliberate pacing, I felt like it undercut most of the intended tension of the movie. and I wish the narrative had been better and more deserving of this lead actress's great work. There's a part where she feels she has blood on her hands, both literally and figuratively. Let's scroll up. April 9th, I saw David Ayer and Jason Statham's newest, A Working Man. Since about 2011, when he was in that remake of The Mechanic, Statham seems to have posited himself as something of the modern Cockney Charles Bronson. These blue-collar, everyman, avenging angel characters who can single-handedly put the world to rights. And I'm mostly here for it. I just wish the offerings weren't so hit or miss. I felt like structurally, this had the inverse problem The Beekeeper had, the other David Ayer Statham film from last year. Whereas that movie had an awesome first act, and then I just stopped caring around the middle on into the last part. This movie, I thought the first few action scenes were so bland. The camera was super shaky and the edits were confusing as hell. But then somewhere around the middle part, maybe even closer to the latter half of the film, not going to spoil anything, but the hero, Statham, is trapped in a van. And from that point onward, it feels like when David Ayer has made awesome action movies. The fight choreography is way more brutal, the edits make sense, and it all climaxes in the compound of these gangsters and human traffickers. And it's just a really hellacious bloodbath. In genre films and action films, the great thing about having villains who are human traffickers, Nazis, and people who hurt small animals is you can do any sadistic thing to them and the audience will totally be on your side. I guess you can take a tiny bit of comfort in that. Here's Statham's interrogating this evil Ruski. Your money's no good to me, you wanker. And then he cuts the line. Moving on. Alright, on April 13th, The Ballad of Wallace Island by James Griffiths. This one was really funny and engaging, and I think I might rate it higher when I revisit it. It's about these former bandmates that get invited to an island, a setup that could easily be a horror movie. They get invited by this eccentric and nerdy guy who was like their ultimate fan. And I guess he's independently wealthy from winning a sweepstakes or lottery, but this really was in the spirit of things like The Big Chill, Sea Caucus 7, or The Wood. This like nostalgia trip between old friends. But narratively it had an added unique spin on that because the character would keep leaving them little Easter eggs that would trigger memory lane. For me personally, the best drama in this subgenre was Kelly Reichardt's Old Joy. And with this one, Wallace Island, I thought it blended whimsical stuff with honest emotions for the most part pretty good. There was directorially some things I thought could have been tighter, but I thought that about a lot of great films initially. Here the gang is, catching the sunset right near the beach.
Right near the beach. Boy!
Let's move along. On April 14th, me and my wife watched this G20, as in the G20 summit. Like a lot of Die Hard clones, it's not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's way better than it has any right to be. And we mostly thought it was a pretty exciting actioneer of the slam bang variety. Viola Davis is obviously a goddess, and I like this part of her career where she's sort of becoming an action-adventure heroine. The villain guy could have been a little bit better. Die Hard has that iconic Alan Rickman performance as the baddie. Passenger 57 has Bruce Payne as Liquid Snake, and Die Hard 3 had Jeremy Irons, and Air Force One had Gary Oldman. And I don't know if this guy was quite up to snuff with that lot. He was kind of a whiny nihilist Bitcoin bro. But it could have been worse. He could have been completely generic like the bad guy in Interceptor. What one aspect I really did like was she wasn't always a one-man army like John McClane. She was just like a preternatural leader in a tense situation. Like she gets into a skirmish in this kitchen part, and then she frees some of these hostages and realizes that they're all former South African security detail, and they kind of form a small rebel unit. Viola Davis as President Sutton. I'd vote for her. I mean, does she got some beefy pro-labor policies? Here's this part from the cool climax where she's hanging on a ledge and the helicopter falls. Let's scroll up. April 15th. This movie by Alex Garland and former Navy SEAL Ray Mendoza, Warfare. This was one of the most upsetting things I've seen in a while. And for as agonizing as it becomes, it's mercifully short. Watching it, my mind went back to certain books I've read like Achilles in Vietnam, or even Eric Remarque's original All Quiet on the Western Front and the film versions of those. It was just such a brutal experience what these troops went through, and made all the more nightmarish by the way it's directed. I've always loved Alex Garland as a screenwriter, even back when he wrote books. The Beach is one of my favorite books. But early on I had loved his directorial work like Dread, Annihilation, Ex Machina, and then I was mixed on that film Men that was like a surreal fable about PTSD. And then Civil War was the first thing he had done that I was negative about. I thought it was formally strong, but it was so clinical, there was nothing I emotionally connected to. So it's a nice turnaround that this film has all the horror and humanity I thought that movie was missing. And I thought it was thankfully devoid of jingoism, unlike American Sniper or 12 Strong. If it is political at all, it was only on a personal level. Just like with Rescue Dawn, is the urge to want to survive political? I think it's a base mammalian instinct, just nature. That's a constant regardless of our thoughts on colonialism or proxy wars. And before the end credits sequence rolls, that final shot, just like the ending of Munich, it was so haunting. Just this feeling of what was all of this even for?
This is a bummer, man. That's a bummer.
Let's scroll up. Oh, on April 19th, I saw 2 movies. One of the movies was The Crawling Eye / The Trollenberg Terror, this funny little bee creature feature from the Atomic Age. And I did a feature descriptive audio commentary for the whole movie while I acted it out with paper dolls right here on Twitch. So if you want to hear my thoughts on that, I did feature-length thoughts on the whole film. But here's this part during the climax where the monsters were trying to noose this guy's throat, and one of his friends accidentally bounces a Molotov off his head.
God damn it!
And then at the theater that day, April 19th, we saw The Woman in the Yard by Wame Colette Serra. And I felt like it was a return to form for him after that disappointing airport movie he did for Netflix, Carry On. And I didn't hate Black Adam, the big DC Comics flop he made, but it hardly felt like one of his films. This stylistically felt like what he used to do. And the visuals he dreamt up did a really good job of articulating how this entity operated, and also illustrated the mother's inner mental decline. Maybe perhaps it over-illustrated a bit, but I didn't think it was beating the audience over the head. I don't know, what do you think? Any parts that were spooky with supernatural stuff, they were always teetering on great, like the 2 Woman in Black films. I thought the script sped through its finale catharsis a little too quick. That ending wasn't as graceful as I would have liked it to be. But overall, I thought it was good, scary fun. And it's hard to make outside, sunny daytime spooky. And a part that stayed in my imagination the most is when the mother and children are barricaded in the attic, jumping at every sound and shadow. And then in one of the corners of the attic, she sees that the woman in the yard's green metallic chair is in the attic. If I had been in that same scenario, I would have passed out and peed my pants, possibly defecated. Now let's go on. April 20th. The new film by Rangano Nioni, the gal that directed that brilliant I Am Not a Witch. This movie's called On Becoming a Guinea Fowl. The way Ousmane Sembène's films gave us a glimpse at Senegalese life through the ages, her movies do that for Zambia, or specifically what it's been like to be a woman there at different times. It was advertised as a comedy, but I was surprised by its emotional depth, the way it all unfolded, this heavy family drama stuff beneath a dark comedy surface. It starts out mostly humorous, but it evolved into a pretty moving exploration of one family's grief, all their secrets, these generational wounds. Here's this part that happens in a flashback, no spoilers, but later on it means a lot to the main character girl's disposition. Let's move on. April 22nd, they remade The Wedding Banquet, Ang Lee's movie from 1993. This is a mostly decent adaptation by Andrew Ahn. It converts the Chinese-Taiwan story to Koreans. I don't think it's quite on a par with those early family dramedies by Ang Lee, like Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, The Wedding Banquet, or The Ice Storm. I consider those to be masterclass examples of how to do that genre for the big screen. Some of the comedy beats in this newer one, they felt like something from a sitcom. And after Andrew had made movies like Spa Night or especially Driveways, this does feel like a bit of a step down. It's an adequate domestic comedy overall. Bowen Yang is always effortlessly funny. First time I became aware of him was on season 2 of John Glazer Loves Gear. He played the perpetually annoyed Spurt. Here's a depiction of the sad heart of both versions of The Wedding Banquet. You're at a family wedding, and you have to keep your love and true self a secret. And the old-timers in the family cry out, "Tradition!" Hey, shut it, Tavia. Go dance in the barn. Let's move on. This is getting so long, I'm sorry. April 23rd. This movie called On Swift Horses, an ensemble film. I haven't read the book, but the scenarios this movie presented, they seemed lifted straight out of those classic Technicolor weepies of the 40s and 50s, like Douglas Sirk's All That Heaven Allows. So I wish the movie was on the level of that. The whole cast does great, strong performances. Ladies and lads, I present to you Will Poulter once again. But the movie's take on post-war social repression, it rubbed me as way too conventional to fully elevate its melodrama. I had the same problem with Sam Mendes' adaptation of Revolutionary Road. This reminded me of that a lot. I'm sorry to bring up Mad Men once again, but that show and Todd Haynes have already done this material so much better many times before. Here's the part where they're all at a garden party. One of the hydrogen bomb tests goes off across the desert flats. Whoa, hold on there, guy. Let's scroll up once again. April 24th, we saw this at the Cinemark, Tinseltown, Until Dawn, or in parentheses, To the Break of Dawn. I was scrolling past some of my friends on Letterboxd. I guess some people feel like time loop movies are played out. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean, if one delivers the thrills, I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't entertained. I'm a really big fan of the video game that Larry Fessenden and Graham Resnick wrote that this is based on. And to convey the branching, choose-your-own-adventure structure of the game, they went with a time loop modus itineranter. And Sakurazaka was correct when he said the time loop structure is analogous to the experience of gaming. In his wicked story, All You Need Is Kill, and the movie version Doug Liman did, Live, Die, Repeat, The Edge of Tomorrow, which is also quite dope. I think it would make good companion viewing with Cold Prey. This is the part where one of these zombified Wendigos is sneaking up behind her. Let's scroll up to April 25th, the 20th anniversary of Pride and Prejudice. Has it been that long? Joe Wright's excellent film. I hope most of you are familiar with this. For my money, it's easily the best Jane Austen adaptation. 2005, so many of the books and movies and video games that came out then, they were so formative on my baby brain's mind back then. Like Christopher Nolan's first Batman movie, this, Kung Fu Hustle, the Peter Jackson King Kong, the Wallace and Gromit Curse of the Were-Rabbit. There's too many.
Too much. There's too much fucking perspective now.
Here, I'm trying to encapsulate how my favorite movie moment from this version of Pride and Prejudice, how it was achieved. She sits on this tree swing and sort of starts to daydream as it spins around, and we see the seasons and the weather change. And it's not a time-lapse shot, but it's actually multiple shots really cleverly stitched together digitally, and it conveys the passage of time pretty well. But this film version, this movie specifically, it transports the characters and the setting of the book to the screen vividly. And I guess some people just feel like it's way too pretty. No. There's no such thing, cabron. No such thing as too pretty. Really lovely stuff. Now I'm gonna scroll up some more. April 26th, I got this on Criterion Blu-ray. Early Sean Baker film, who just won the Oscar for Honora. One of his earliest directorial efforts, The Prince of Broadway. I remember where I was when I first discovered Sean as a director and an editor. But it wasn't this, it was from the same year, a movie called Takeout. And I saw it the same day I saw Ramin Barani's Chop Shop. And both of those movies have this kitchen sink realism, almost like a documentary. But being pretty young at the time, I connected more with the childhood story in Chop Shop. And I would have never predicted those two careers would go in the directions they've gone. My personal favorite for Sean Baker is still The Florida Project. Anytime one of his new movies comes out, there's always this small discourse on Twitter and Blue Sky about people feel like he fetishizes poverty. And I personally feel like that's kind of a dumb take. I mean, Would you say the same thing about Andrea Arnold or the Dardenne brothers or Ken Loach? These aren't really artists backed by big Hollywood. And it's not crazy to think that some storytellers just care about the plight of impoverished people, and not that long ago were below the poverty line themselves. But I thought this was a pretty good early effort, along with that Chop Shop movie I was talking about. And like the late John Cassavetes, he's able to capture these potent emotional performances. He's still kind of finding his voice and the rhythm he edits to. It's a pretty effective, humane drama. It's a really good glimpse of New York in the aughts. Here's a scene of the poor Pops crossing the street in the snow, lugging that baby around. Alrighty, let's move along. Scroll up. On April 27th, I saw Being Maria by Jessica Palaud. Just a content warning, this film does deal with a very specific type of assault, so maybe skip past this part. This was a rough one, about Maria Schneider's experience on working on Bertolucci's The Last Tango in Paris. I think that's from like 1972. I first learned about that movie in high school. I had a book that was talking about quote-unquote erotic films, and I found an old DVD of it at the old Premiere Video in Dallas, and I thought, ooh, this is going to be a kinky movie, and then you start watching it, and it's more about deeply disturbed people using sex in a very self-destructive way, treating it like a drug to fight grief. I don't remember what essay it was I was reading, but a film critic referred to that type of psychological drama as being a sad sex movie. And later on I discovered better examples of this, like Cronenberg's Crash is probably the deepest and most disturbing of the lot. Not that crap that won the Oscar in '05. The Cronenberg Crash, based on the J.G. Ballard novel. And then Steve McQueen's Shame with Michael Fassbender as Satiriasis. So, as a young person, to watch The Last Tango in Paris and realize it's not supposed to be a dirty movie, it was pretty eye-opening, and it's shot by the incredible cinematographer Vittorio Storaro. It's one of the best-looking movies ever made. And I guess for years in the non-English press, Maria Schneider had always voiced her anger about the way she was treated on the film, but I only discovered it when it blew up on Twitter about that some of the things that happen in the movie are not consensual. And Being Maria, it deals with the way her concerns and protests on set were not listened to and ignored, sometimes laughed at, all just to coddle Brando's ego and his specific brand of method acting, where you're basically allowed to be an insufferable prick on set and no one can critique you because of art. I've seen plenty of movies where there's some shady, fucked up shit that happened behind the scenes, but it's not actually a part of the film celluloid that we're seeing. Last Tango in Paris actually contains the unsimulated abuse act, so there's really not a separating art from an artist. The cruelty was actually baked into the mold, so therefore that's one of the only Bertolucci movies I don't champion. What I appreciated most about the Being Maria movie is how it deflates the process of actors and directors who swear by really gung-ho method. Clearly working on movies or theater is a craft, it's a work of art, but it's also a workplace. With the exception of maybe willing stuntmen, there's really no reason for any real harm to come to performers. And clearly emotions can run high on a film set, depending on the drama of the scene. But it's so unprofessional even to just verbally blow your stack at somebody. Especially when you can just step away and cool off. When it's a bigger thing, like it's part of this method philosophy to try to manipulate a performance out of an actor. Or this here, where Brando insisted on trying to get a raw, honest, and hurt response from Maria Schneider. It's just not cool, man. And shame on the crew and castmates that just stood there silent. Like, yo, dude, I know that's your method, but I'm not. I can get to these same scenes differently than you. There's no reason to coerce or manipulate anyone into anything. Just agree beforehand what makes the drama work best for the screen, and thank God for intimacy coaches now on set. Transparency is key. Going into this, I was really worried it was going to feel like a Lifetime channel or that Jean-Luc Godard movie that came out a while back.
What the hell?
I guess one nitpick I have against it is Vittorio Storaro's lighting on the original is so flawless and immaculate. In this movie, every scene has this glowing, foggy condensation look on the screen, the type of thing Janusz Kaminski does a lot better. But the great MVP of Being Maria is this gal in the lead, Anna Maria Bartolomei. and Matt Dillon as Brando. They are some of the best performances of 2025. Here's some companion viewing thoughts. A much more subtle and thoughtful counterpart to this could be The Assistant from 2019 with Julia Garner. Check that out before you watch this. Alright, let me get off my soapbox. Let's scroll up. Ooh, April 28th. This espionage thriller, The Amateur, by James Haas and starring Rami Malek. I haven't read the book or seen the John Savage film from the 80s that this is also based on, but I thought it was mostly pretty fun. It's just thrilling to see a normal guy, a not hyper-competent Jason Bourne or James Bond, attempt to do espionage stuff and hunt people. Of course, Soderbergh and David Koepp's Black Bag is the thinking person spy film for the year. Someone in my message box said, Jack Ryan if he was a mega nerd. Is there a manufacturing consent aspect to this? I guess. It's not exactly the most rosy-eyed look at spy work in the CIA. I still need to read the book this is based on, but lots of revenge movies are cautionary tales in that Friedrich Nietzsche sense. Whoever fights monsters, and so on and so forth. One little sweet thing about this movie, The Amateur, is in that Statham movie, The Mechanic 2 Resurrection, he did this exact same kill to one of his targets. But to me, in that movie, it was shot a bit crummy and nowhere near as scary as I thought it should have been, where he plants a charge on the bottom of this clear connected pool between two skyscrapers. I had a false memory. I thought Colombiana had the same kill, but then I went back and watched that clip on YouTube, and she actually just makes the guy fall into a pool of sharks. But in this, I think I'd rather be eaten by sharks. My fear of heights is so bad, I would never even get in one of these skyscraper pools in the first place. But just imagining the fear that was going through that guy's mind before he fell. He just tries to enjoy his last moments and cannonballs. Okay, moving on. April 29th, Cronenberg's newest, The Shrouds. Even with all the deep philosophical stuff in this about grief, I thought a lot of it was overall tongue-in-cheek funny. And I wonder if that was the intended impact, but nonetheless, it was engrossing. Heaven forbid this is latter-day Cronenberg. He is getting up there in age. My personal favorite of this era is probably the newer Crimes of the Future. But one of the other movies it kept making me think about was Eternal Sunshine, where the memories we have with our loved ones is really all that makes us who we are. And where the company and Lacuna Incorporated in Eternal Sunshine was trying to erase a person from your memory, this is almost like people who can't let go of somebody, even on into death. I also started to think about all these dead social media accounts of people who have passed on, where you keep getting annual reminders of memories you have with them. Part of the grieving process for some people is to move on, and not really throughout the memories you have of the person, but come back to them when you're feeling a bit more healed. And this character in this, I know that Cronenberg actually lost his longtime wife, and Vincent Cassel's character in this is totally a cipher for Cronenberg, but while using the shrouds, he can't even let go of her remains. He wants to watch as they decay into oblivion. And I know that's really dark and fucked up, like you don't actually own another human being. But when you really love someone, you feel like every part of them should be a part of you. I could write a book-long essay on my thoughts on this, so I'm going to stop right here. Oh, and another double performance by Diane Kruger, echoing Kim Novak in Hitchcock's Vertigo. Here they're walking through the shrouds and these headstones like big USB drives, constantly transmitting what's going on below in the dirt. Alright, let's move along to April 30th. The new Christopher Landon, the guy who did the Happy Death Day films. I tend to be a big fan of the gimmicky, high-concept thrillers, like Speed, 1994, Wes Craven's Red Eye. The late, great Larry Cohn in the early 2000s wrote those awesome screenplays for cellular and phone booth within almost the same year. I was hoping for more of that kind of magic going into this, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little disappointed. And some of that is due to the directing and the clunky dialogue at parts. It's also got really intrusive graphics. Like in post, the editing team was cluttering the screen sometimes when the main girl was getting these text drops. Little things like that were causing it to trip over the tension it had so carefully been trying to build. Also, is it just me or did the ad campaign trailers for this spoil some of the last act? Trailers show entirely too much stuff now. Speaking of Wame Colette Serra, I've always appreciated the way him and his editors have shown on-screen graphics when characters are getting some screen time or text. I usually think this main actress lady, Megan Fahey, is sort of an ice queen, but she did carry a lot of this movie on her back dramatically, and with just her eyes and expressions, she was able to project fear and paranoia. Landon is very film literate. There's some cool visual nods to Hitchcock here. Spotted a hat tip to Notorious 1946. I kind of wish we lived in an alternate universe where this same script was given to Brian De Palma. Here she is walking, getting some very threatening text messages, and just like my shorts in gym class, they drop. Okay, let's boogie down the road. On May 1st, we're catching up to the present. The Texas Theater was showing some Bruce Bickford shorts, and this one is called Castle from 2011. Bruce is the animator who did all of Frank Zappa's music videos. And this film from 2011 is just like his own Prometheus's Garden, or that Chilean film a few years back, The Wolf House, where it's just in a league of its own as a surreal odyssey of animation. I don't know what else to say other than just buckle up and let the dream flow where it flows. But warning to the wise, don't do psychedelics before watching this. Okay, let's move along. May 1st. Oh, I forgot. That same day, we saw Ryan Coogler's newest, Sinners. I talked about this while playing Indica in my stream the other day, and how I think it's Ryan Coogler's, definitely his masterpiece to date. I'm probably going to end up rating this even higher, because I think it's an astonishingly good genre horror film of the Southern Gothic variety. I just took umbrage with the little bumper coda at the end. It rubbed me spiritually the wrong way a little bit. But this is exactly the type of movie with personality and character that you would hope Coogler would make after those two colossal Mouse House blockbusters. And the ensemble is brilliant. Michael B. Jordan is brilliant. Jack O'Connell. No hyperbole, folks. This is up there with Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark. Here I created the moment that made me the most scared. He's walking to his car and you see the little fireflies in the distance, and then you notice a creature crawling on the barn in the distance. And you're like, oh, a wild cougar. And then it stands up and you realize it's a man. And then when he flies out of frame to jump on the guy, I was like, jumpin' Jehoshaphat. This movie's too scary for me. Alright, May 1st, let's scroll up to May 2nd. This movie, Rosario, by Philip Vargas. Okay, as a horror movie, it offers a pretty strong lead performance by the main gal. I don't know how to say her name. And it has a lot of genuinely eerie moments. The ghoulish monster effects are awesome. But it has that over-reliance on demonic possession cliches we've seen, and that kind of drains a lot from the terror, for me personally. Photographically, I did love how it synthesized that Mario Bava look. The stained glass blues, reds, greens, kind of how Guillermo del Toro's cinematographer Dan Lauston did on Crimson Peak. That's always a juicy color scheme. But this kind of suffered from that funhouse structure that some of James Wan's Conjuring films have. You're just going around every corner getting a little jump scare, and eventually if they're not building the tension accurately, you just kind of go numb to it. But with James Wan, he's always flexing cinematically, so at least he has the fancy camera setup. There's more technically impressive going on. James Wan's batting average is way more impressive because his movies have what the nerds call mise en scène? Mise en scene? Mise en Sean Connery? Here's my favorite part of the movie. And this scene is just another one in a lot of contemporary horror that shows just how influential that under the bed scene is from Poltergeist 1982. She's hiding, she thinks she's safe from the monster, and oh my god, he's tearing through the mattress. Rawr. Hey, you got any gum? Let's move along. May 3rd. The Surfer, starring Nicolas Cage by Lorcan Finnegan. When I was reading about this before I went in, I saw it miscategorized as horror set in Australia, so my mind immediately went to like Long Weekend 1978. But it's really more of a psychological thriller. It's the first thing I've enjoyed from beginning to end by Finnegan. And if you're a big fan of unhinged Nicolas Cage, he's the real reason to go to the movie. He sells the entire thing. He's our master of over-the-top acting, our era's James Cagney. And this is overall an entertaining but one of the silliest takes on thrillers that can be filed under, is the main character cracking up, or is something untoward actually going on? I wish his Wicker Man remake was more well-made like this, and had Nicolas Cage going to this level of crazy. Here he is just brooding in his car, losing his shit. Alrighty, let's scroll up. May 4th. A new adaptation of Bonjour Tristes by a Mrs. Dirga Chubose. When we were walking out of this, I immediately defaulted to doing the unfair thing of comparing it to the old Otto Preminger adaptation with Gene Seberg, but this really is its own thing, playing to its own music. The differences are as pronounced as Purple Noon and The Talented Mr. Ripley. This one captures beautifully that languid sadness of being young, and every shot the director lady has composed here captures the way that sun-draped elegance of the French Riviera and all the emotional undercurrents the gal is quietly going through. Chloe Sevigny is brilliant always, but the greatest thing about this movie, other than the directing, is this lead gal's performance. I've never seen her before, but she is hypnotic, and the director seems to know that when she's in frame, she is the most illuminating thing on screen. I think I'm going to butcher her name. Lily McInerney? Ernie? She has these dark brown eyes, like Hannah Fairman or Aja Argento. Like I could see her and Johnny Depp's kid auditioning for all the same parts. But yeah, her performance in this is a revelation. This movie did a good job of breathing some new life into Sagan's timeless book about desire, guilt, and when you're at this age, when you just don't feel free enough. And here she is putting on some blue eye makeup. Alright, let's move along to May 5th. The Most Precious of Cargoes. The guy that directed The Artist, Michel Hazanavicius, he's making animations now. Animations with what seems to be a pretty significant budget. But I wonder, is he crashing out after that funny bad Jean-Luc Godard biopic he did? A lot of this was mostly fine, well animated, surface level, not really deep enough. And that great composer, Alexandre Desplat, I thought the cutesy score he made was completely out of place and inappropriate for this dark subject matter. It's about a kid that gets thrown from one of the Holocaust trains. In more recent memories, Tal Cantor's Letter to a Pig presented a lot of these same themes far better, but hers was a short film though. I noticed a lot of the character design in this looked like April in the Extraordinary World. Then I would just start wishing I was watching April in the Extraordinary World. I'm trying to recreate the impact of this admittedly good shot from this movie, The Most Precious of Cargoes, where this locomotive comes flying at the camera, and then on the front you suddenly see the skull of the Grim Reaper. Okay, let's scroll up. May 6th. Talk about every frame a painting. The Legend of Oki by Isaiah Saxon. I always thought that he used to go under the pseudonym Encyclopedia Pictura for his music videos, but it turns out that's actually a collective of artists that he's the masthead of. They did that awesome short film, The Tale of the Hillbilly, and one of the greatest music videos ever made, Bjork's Wanderlust. This one just kind of dazzles with the artistry on display in every shot. And this had a fable approach to what in screenwriting classes they call the magical friend or pet setup. Things like E.T., Iron Giant, Gremlins, Black Stallion, Lilo and Stitch, How to Train Your Toothless, and this is certainly one of the best to come from that mold. Probably the best of that kind since Bong Joon-ho's Okja, for me personally. It stars that little German girl, Helena Zangel from System Crasher, who I thought should have won Best Actress in 2020. She's just like a raw tornado of emotion. And she's as expressive with her face as Renee Falconetti from The Passion of Joan of Arc. She plays the little kid who rescues this mythological Aki creature. Kind of looks like a Chinese golden snub-nosed monkey mixed with a mogwai. Speaking of mogwai, But there's still a lot of movies to be released this year. Obviously, we have a new Wes Anderson coming down the pipe, but I wonder if anything is going to top this movie's production design, visual effects, or cinematography this year. It was lit by Evan Prozovsky, who's a great lighting cameraman in the same vein as Andrew Dros Palermo. It's actually, early on in this, it actually has a lot of shots that reminded me of The Green Knight. And then later on in the daytime scenes, it almost seems like the same color palette of the Super 16mm of Moonrise Kingdom. I have a lot of thoughts on this movie. I need to think about it more. Here his little monkey ears are poking up. Ooh! He looks like he's going, "Wake and bake, bro, wake and bake." Let's scroll up. On May 7th, I got the Blu-ray of The Umbrellas of Cherbourg by Jacques Demy. I thought it was supposed to come packaged with the Young Girls of Rochefort, but I guess not. I mean, those really are two parts of a whole. With both of those, Demy clearly made the two greatest French musicals of all time. What can I really say about this that hasn't already been said? We get the radiant tapestry of colors and melodies. It's just one of my favorite comfort movies, and one thing I like most is how it transforms heartbreak into visual poetry. Each frame just explodes like a pastel dream. And by the way, when Damien Chazelle won his Oscar, he probably should have dedicated the whole thing to Jacques Demy. La La Land's a good movie and everything, but it only exists because of this movie and Vincent Minnelli.
Let's scroll just a bit more.
On May 8th on Netflix, we watched this new movie by Gareth Evans called Havoc. It's the guy who did the Raid Redemption movies. Him and Timo Tjahjanto are about neck and neck the greatest to emerge from Indonesian action movies. But Timo had been cranking out hit after hit, and Evans' trajectory went the Raid 1, and then the even better the Raid 2, Thugs, and then on into that awesome underrated folk horror movie, Apostle. And then there was a bit of a gap in his filmography as far as feature films went. And I can't lie and say I'm not a little disappointed in this with how high he and Timo have lifted the bar for action. And right off the bat, one of the first things I noticed is how much more gun-centric this one is than his previous films. And another obvious thing you quickly notice is how overly reliant on computerized filmmaking this is. Like he was trying to build this overly stylized graphic novel universe for the story to take place in. And for my personal taste, it did sometimes overly lean into that intentionally artificial feel. And I'm not really sure if it was intended to be cartoonish like this. Also, a lot of the comedy beats and dialogue just doesn't work. And there were also parts that were supposed to be really serious that had me laughing. So it's tonally weird. But if you're able to turn your brain off, it does have two of the coolest action sequences of the year. There's this really funny shootout in a cabin that felt like something out of Hot Shots Part 2, where Tom Hardy just has infinite ammo, and he hears enemies approaching through the basement, and he just opens a hatch and sprays bullets down there like he's just cleaning out some mice. Don't you sneak up on me. Alrighty, let's move along. May 9th, I went and visited my sister, and with her and my nephew, we rented The Day the Earth Blew Up, and I got to watch it again. I already praised it to bejesus and back, but I did forget to mention how scary these parasitic gum monsters are. They're a dash of John Carpenter's The Thing, and then also when No Face goes apeshit and Spirited Away. Excellent Looney Tunes movie. Let's go forward. On May 10th, I went into this blind, and I'm used to my local Cinemark showing Bollywood and Tamil musicals. This was the first time I'd ever seen a mainstream wide release for a Vietnamese movie, so it must be a big hit there. This is called The Ancestral Home. And I'm such a dumbass, I went in not knowing that there wasn't going to be any English subtitles, so I just kind of vaguely think I understand what the movie was about and was happening, but some of the images were powerful enough for me to piece together the story of what was going on. Energy-wise, it did seem like it's overly quirky, and the characters cheese for the camera a lot, but still without understanding what they were saying. I don't know if it's the most irritating movie ever or it was genuinely funny. It sort of seemed like a family healing story, but as purely cinema, just pictures went, because that's all I was really going on. It kind of reminded me of We Have a Ghost from a few years ago with David Harbour. What I could make out is it was supposed to be about a young girl who's like an influencer who has to come home to the long-standing ancestral home. And while she's there, the ghost of her grumpy older brother who passed away starts to torment her, but not in a scary way. It's more funny. Here's a part where the ghost of her brother tries to belly flop onto her to possess her body. What? WrestleMania! Okay. Scroll up, going on to May 11th. A movie by James Madigan with Josh Hartnett called Fight or Flight. I think James is mostly a visual effects guy. And while I didn't love this, I did enjoy the frenetic energy of it and its sense of humor. The only parts I didn't like is when it tried to be dramatic, it was a little out of place and schmaltzy. I love Katie Sackhoff, but she's kind of miscast as the main villain here. Does anyone know what the effects of taking toad venom is supposed to do? I just assumed it would be a sedating psychedelic thing. I had always read that some of the Central American tribal natives had dipped their spears and darts in it, but maybe that was more tree frogs of the poison variety. This movie seemed to depict it as more of a PCP effect, and not counting the over-the-top comedy of the Crank movies. I always wondered in an actual life or death situation, if someone were to blast themselves with Rocket Angel during one of these scenarios, would they even be able to function enough to fight the bad guys, or would they just eat everybody's face in the general vicinity like a zombie? No one go out there and try that at home. I'm just hypothetically. These are the things I think about at night. And here Josh is looking like a Long Beach member of a ska band and going melee with a chainsaw. Alright, let's scroll forward. It was May 11th. Now we're going up to May 12th. Shadow Force, a new Joe Carnahan movie. I guess his last really good movie was Cop Shop. He's a Tony Scott protege. He's always a solid action director. I enjoyed this as much as that time loop movie he did for Hulu. And just like that one, I didn't really care much about the human conflict going on, but all the action stuff is clearly serviceable. I'd choose it over Doug Liman's version of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I hope Mark Strong never gets tired of playing villains. Also, I'm really liking this actor, Omar Sy. I noticed Kerry Washington's a tiny little thing. She knows how to handle them machine guns like Cobra Commander. And here's this funny little bit where that great actress from The Holdovers, Divine Joy Randolph, watch out, Mama's gonna cock that shotgun.
Yes!
Let's move along. Catching up to the present. Alright, May 15th. I saw Paddington in Peru again. My wife got to see the first two Paddingtons with me in theaters, but this one she only got to see just now on Fandangus. Part 2 is still the GOAT of this series. I hope they make these cuddly bear movies forever. I even want Paddington to fight Terminator and Dracula and stuff. And this time Paddington visits Peru. It's totally lush and colorful, more of an Indiana Jones adventure movie. It's got tons of heart, and of course they're trying to make Paddington run the whole gauntlet of the history of slapstick comedy. This is the first one in the series, though, that Paul King didn't direct, he just produced. But I did notice it seemed to be the most film literate of the lot, where it was trying to make the visual nods more obvious. Here's this moment where Paddington has a psychic spiritual vision of this bear statue. Okay, let's move on. We're almost at the present. Speaking of, Shadow Force is like a not terrible version of this same story. Sorry. Alright, May 18th. Got to see a retro revival screening of The Wiz. For a long time, things like this, Xanadu and Grease Part 2, they were so easy to mock, but at least with American films, if you look at a lot of the modern musicals that come out, they're just ass compared to The Wiz and the other ones I mentioned. If these movies came out now, they'd be considered art house movies and win every Oscar. Although it was seen as an oddity when it came out, I think on the production front it did win awards. I don't see how it wouldn't. It's clearly, along with the original Wizard of Oz, that's one of the only places that stands neck and neck with it, is the production design, art direction, set decoration. All a work of art with a capital A crystal clear high watermark of production design. Most of the songs are more hit than miss for me, or should I say hit and annoying. But during this most recent screening, I think I really loved the vast majority of them. As a kid, I never really got why when Dorothy is in New York, why they're singing there. I think it would be more effective if the musical aspects came along with when she arrives in the more stylized Oz. And I still don't really like that first song that Juanita from Billy Madison sings at the dinner table, but damn, Sidney Lumet and co. really doing some crazy shit on this one. As a kid, the introduction of those graffiti munchkins, it scared the shit out of me. I thought they were like the ghosts of flattened people. Let's move on. Okay, just the other day, May 23rd, I saw the new Marvel thing, Thunderbolts, and I mostly had a good time, and it was operating best when it was a good action movie. And I mostly thought a lot of it was rousing. This director, Jake Schreier, he has a lot of background in music videos and smaller dramatic films. The only movie of his I really loved a lot back in the day was this thing with Frank Langella. I think it was called Frank and Robot. With these big budget movie factory Marvel films, I always kind of wonder who's really directing the action. We have the making ofs and behind the scenes reels of Chloe Zhao actually calling shots on action scenes during the Eternals, but still even more surprising is that the Russo brothers, these TV sitcom guys, could direct action so good. I'm not saying it's not within the realm of possibility. I want to believe they helmed the majority of it, but how much of it was pre-vised by completely different artists and then realistically carried out by visual effects supervisors and second unit. In the first act, I was kind of invested in when the main ensemble finds themselves all trapped together and they first meet Bob. I wanted to root for these guys who see themselves as losers. Although it is a little bit funny that Florence and David Harbour are doing those Yakov-Smirnoff accents. And at first I liked the actor who was playing this Bob character and how genuinely clueless he seemed and how excited he was to find his budding powers. And there was like a genuine horror and wonder there, like Tetsuo and Akira or Josh Trank's Chronicle. But then when this Marvel version of Amanda Waller, Elaine, gets her hooks into the guy and he goes through his arc and you see that he's got a deep rooting darkness in him, I did have trouble taking him seriously at first as a threat, because this actor, he looks like Screech to me from Saved by the Bell. But then thankfully they did this visually interesting thing where they would key out all the color on him to where he really did represent like a void that he was talking about emotionally. And if you or anyone you've ever known has struggled with like really deep trauma or chemical depression, just like Bob says in this, or Timothy Hutton in Ordinary People, it really is like this abyss of a black hole that just pulls you in, and the more you focus on it, the more it seems to win and take over. But the story zips so quickly into that deep traumatic turmoil, and I didn't really feel like it always earned getting there. But just like the WandaVision show in some of the better Marvel movies, if it wasn't annoying me with occasional twee banter, I mostly cared about what was going on with the characters. And I did appreciate audiovisually how the filmmakers tried to depict this dark side of Sentry's personality. What in Carl Jung's psychology was called the shadow. Maybe a huge behemoth Marvel movie like this is really only going to depict mental illness on a surface level, but I mean, how often do you see large budget sci-fi fantasy movies approaching the topic at all? And with a lot of these big comic book movies, there is this push-pull between really poignant, heavy stuff and really clunky, almost goofy characterizations of certain struggles and concepts. And when Elena, when she has to dive into his shadow, and she's like,
Don't try to trick me, Gypsy. I will look upon your treasures. Is this understood?
I was hoping that journey into his psyche would be more like Tarsum's The Cell, trying to pull out D'Onofrio's inner child. And there was some cool visual homages to music videos of Michelle Gondry and Spike Jonze as being John Malkovich, where one room represents a specific memory, and then the next one you fall into, you're coming out of the ceiling or the side of the wall. And then the way the Sentry Void character would float, loom over people, and they would become like these ashen blobs, like Hiroshima. Did anyone else feel like that was a hat tip to Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Pulse? Or its ghost being a metaphor for unbelievable sadness or alienation? I sort of audibly groaned when Elaine, she's like this PR Svengali. She's always able to get in front of a situation and not face any consequences. In that thrown together press conference at the end, I was hoping Ghost just wouldn't play ball and then she would just grab this girl and suplex her into the street. If they had done that, that probably would have been the greatest ending in Marvel history. But whatever. To each his own. So we scroll up one last time. I believe that's all. Oh, on May 26th, me and Jessica rewatched all the Mission Impossible films in preparation for hopefully getting to see the new one on June 2nd. I've already gone into extensive detail on those how I feel about those movies at my blog before, so I'm not going to... And I feel like wrapping this up, so I don't want to retread right there. Scrolling. I guess the graceful Lord above saved the best for last because May 31st I caught this. It is the newest by Jia Zhangke, Caught by the Tides. I almost have just too many words to say on this and I need to hurry. Let's just say it affected me the same way Linklater's Before Sunset did, or Before Sunrise trilogy did. And technically it's a film 20 years in the making because he's cutting together so much footage of Miss Xiao Tao from now and back decades since they first started working together. And this is easily his best film since Ash is the Purest White. It actually reminds me I need to rent Mountains May Depart. This is one of the greatest films about a romance passing through time. And I guess I just don't want to spill my guts on it right now because the thing hit me in the feels so hard that I'm afraid I might start sobbing like an infant. And the salty tears inside this here mask, that's not going to be good. It's going to be musky. Alrighty, family and friends, lovers, former lovers. If you were able to tune in, thank you. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share with me, or I'd especially like movie recommendations, if you got any, I can be found on Letterboxd and Mubi under Wandering Image, but across all other social media, I'm sasquatchobelisk, as always. And as of right now, I need to go make a pee-pee. But before I drop trow, let me leave you with these words our Uncle Bill used to say. It's alright. It's okay. It's something to live for. Jesus told me so. Vaya con Dios.